friends, welcome back to another Higher Grounds podcast. Of course, you can tell that your center chair is today being filled by not the normal leader of this great form of. And is this entertainment or is this ministry?
Yes.
Okay, this is entertainment team.
I mean, I was saying yes to everything you said. I mean,
been a long time.
Ministry, yes. Is it entertainment? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it wrong at times? Yes.
Yes.
Is it right at times? Yes.
Sure.
Sounds like Southern gospel to me.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started on them bunch of.
This train is fixing to crash right out of the gate.
This will be my last time on this show.
Oh, the Higher Grounds podcast.
It
On the
can
last episode.
all that Southern gospel can fall off in a pit where it came from.
Now, hang on a second, Brother Chris is going to evangelism. Don't be
Yeah.
making blanket statements that may.
That's right. Yeah,
But I'm not
I do not
an
endorse everything that is said on this podcast. I agree with whatever you agree with.
And that may be the wisest statement that's been made on here in a while, right?
He really is an evangelist.
That's right.
I don't even believe in evangelists, but I mean, he is one.
Oh, mercy. Oh, this is. We might should just close this with a word of prayer and go to at least go to the restaurant.
Yeah, I believe in itinerant speakers. I don't believe in evangelists.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Another episode for another day.
Yes.
Maybe so.
For
That
me
would
and
be
you.
that would be a good podcast.
But see, here's the
Absolutely.
thing. I believe in revival. He don't believe in revival.
Okay.
I don't believe in
Brother
evangelists.
Chris, you don't believe in revival?
He believes. You
I don't believe in the tooth fairy. So we all got stuff we don't believe in.
Yeah.
How about you,
Actually,
Mikhail?
let me clarify something. He was picking and throwing that toward me, not Brother Chris. Brother
Right,
Chris,
revival.
right. Chris
Yes,
is
I believe
Chris
in that.
is not an evangelist. He's a revivalist.
That's right. Yeah. I would say, honestly, I'm sure if we got down, and this is, I know we're getting off
we're
topic
just
here,
playing.
but we probably would agree more than what when I use the term evangelist, I use it as it's defined in this contemporary moment.
I feel you.
absolutely. You know what I mean? That's just a word that people would.
Well, I'm feeling better and better about you all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to get a meeting with you. That's all.
You got it, buddy. You got it.
You're like the best preacher I know.
We need somebody at Homeschool Chapel next
I mean, you and
week.
Brother Poindexter are like,
He's the best preacher he knows, too.
That's
You
right.
got that right.
And I can. There's a lot of evidence on these podcasts of him saying something to that effect. He's the best.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, he's told me.
Yes.
that, so.
Yeah, sometimes he'll call me and say something similar to that.
Yeah, I'll say, you do realize how blessed you are.
Yeah, that's right.
That
That's
I
it.
entered your life.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
wow.
And he'll give me the date.
That
the
sounds like me
place.
talking to my wife.
So normally we start out with pleasantries, but I believe we're
Oh,
way
no,
past
we're way past the play. Hey,
Wow,
Mike,
yeah.
how are you doing?
I
I'm
see
good.
you.
You're
Everybody
doing good.
Brother
Great.
Andy, Brother Chris.
Yeah,
this is
pastor,
good.
and we good. Yeah, the
pastor,
church is good.
Evangelist, middleman, right?
So we got
You
it.
got it.
We're good.
Roger that.
So here's what the podcast is all about today. Topically, we are sitting here today with two men that grew up in homes where their dads were either pastors or became pastors. I believe
Full-time ministry guys.
Full-time ministry
That's
guys.
right.
And so what we wanted to do today is kind of bring that perspective into a conversation. So because we know that a lot of the people that listen to this podcast come from ministry families.
Sure.
And sometimes, from what I've been told in conversations I've had, sometimes that can be a lonely world because you don't really get a lot of conversation with people outside of it until you become an adult.
Yeah.
And so if they're younger, they may not have heard a lot of conversations about. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to talk about what it was like to grow up in a family that was ministry centric, and so forth and so on. So real quickly, we'll start with Brother Chris. Just give us kind of the backstory of your life in a ministry family.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am a fifth generation preacher. So my dad was a preacher before I was ever born. Obviously, my grandfather pastored churches in the West Georgia area. Several. He kind of was raised in a mindset a little different. It was independent Baptist, but it wasn't like ours. They were amillennial, and it was just a little bit different. And you stayed at church 2 or 3 years, and then you leave, and that's just it. And then you go somewhere else. And so because of that, he pastored churches all over the place, and everybody knew who he was. Radio broadcast, stuff like that. And then my dad was a preacher. He pastored just for a little while, but really for the majority of my time at home, seemingly he was with Rock of Ages prison ministry, and so full time on the road preaching revivals in the prisons and stuff like that. And then later on, right after I got married, he became a pastor, and he was in Virginia for 13, 14 years. So he was there a while, but grew up in a pastor's home. We were real close. We lived right next door to my grandparents. My grandfather was our pastor, so I was just all around. I mean, just consumed and have just absorbed in that, ministry life. Just growing up, it was just what it was,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But you entered ministry early, though.
I did. Yeah, I started preaching. I was about 11, and then like full time. I started working at our church full time when I was 18. And then I became the pastor after I turned 20.
That's really all
That's all I've known. That's all I've known. I mean, that's all I've.
Have you had this is not a comment.
I know what you're about to ask, and it's okay.
Have you ever had a secular job?
Yes, I have. Yeah, when I was in Bible college, I actually graduated early, and then I started working. I was working at Chick-fil-A when I was 14 years old. So I worked. God's chicken.
Turn the logo around, Mike.
Absolutely. They let me work. I was 14. I dressed up as the cow. And
you did.
Oh yeah.
The cow?
Absolutely.
Him and Josh.
Josh Montgomery. He's in the cow fraternity with me. So the fraternity of the cows. Yeah, absolutely. So
that's utterly ridiculous.
So yeah.
Is that some kind of strange, like skull and bones kind of a?
It must be.
Okay.
It's
the fraternity of the cows.
Yeah, the fraternity of the cows.
Is it the golden calf?
So I mean, I know that's not what people consider a secular job as far as raising a family and all that job. But I did work, and then when I was in Bible college, I got a job at the carpet mill there in North. I went to Faith Baptist Institute in Resaca, Georgia. There's carpet mills all around that Dalton area, So I got me a job at the carpet mill, and that was my plan, was to work there. Me and my wife were going to get married. I was going to continue in college and just had a good job in like the shipping department and stuff. And so I knew what it was like. And then even when I started at the church, 18 full time, my father-in-law worked he was a painter, owned his own business, and so several days a week I would work, with him and others. And I have another job. I'm a little more embarrassed of it than I am of the cow, but I'll tell you what it is. I work part time. Even when I was working at the church part time, I was working at the mall as a mall cop.
Oh, really?
Like Paul Blart.
Did you ride one of the? Is it a Segway?
No. They never gave me a Segway or a gun, but I didn't get a Segway for sure. And
taser.
No, not a taser. They gave me a quarter, like if I needed to call somebody. This
is before cell phones, right? Before cell phone.
No, I had a cell phone.
For a guy that hates confrontation to be a mall cop.
Yeah. Well, I never did. The week after I quit, because I started pastoring full time. I became the pastor. I'm like, well, I probably need to give most of my time to this. So, they had like a robbery at the mall, and I missed it. Yeah, I got shot and everything.
Oh wow,
sure did. But anyway, I missed that. So
whoa, back up.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Yeah, the week after my last week as a mall cop, they had a robbery. Somebody was robbing, I think, the Brinks truck.
The mall cop got shot?
I don't know if the mall cop got shot. I can't remember. But there was shots fired and somebody got hurt. And it was like a week or two after my last day.
If the mall cop didn't have a gun, he couldn't have done the shooting.
That's right. No, he didn't.
Could have been a bystander too, though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow. How about that?
I think they were. They had the Brinks truck would pull up, and then they would come in and like load cash in like the ATM machines in the mall, or in like the deposit machines and stuff they had there. And I think that's what got right. That's a while back. That was a long time ago, but I think that's.
Now you spent a little time in TV too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, tell us about that career.
Yeah. A little time. I had 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
So that's right.
Yeah. Tell me about
that. When I was pastoring in Georgia, the History Channel reached out. I thought it was a joke, but it was true. The History Channel, they reached out. They were doing a documentary on hell, and they come to our church, and they brought cameras, and I don't know how they got a hold of me necessarily, but and how they chose to come to our church.
Yeah,
but
I was going to ask how they picked you out.
Yeah, I don't know. I got a call on the phone. I thought it was a joke. I mean, I got, I don't know about y'all, but I got friends that, do stupid stuff like that. And so, like, hey, we're such and such, company, and we want to interview. I'm like, yeah, okay. And I thought it was a joke, so I didn't even really. I wasn't going to respond, and then I thought, well, let me just Google, and I Googled the lady's name and then like the company. I think it was called Red Marble Media is what it was, and her name was something Engelstein or something like that. So I just Googled it, and like sure enough, like a
Jewish
legit
name?
Yeah, legit. Like their office is in New York City. In fact, me and my wife were visiting New York City. I said, let's go look it up, and so I knocked on the door. We went in there. There's these guys running computers like a production company. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I thought when we got in there, they would be like, oh, that's Chris. You were on one of our documentaries. It was just more like, who are you and why are you here? And I'm just like, I don't know. I just wanted to see the place. But anyway, it was legit. They came and filmed our service, filmed me preaching and
interviewed.
And at that time, you were about 20 years old?
Yeah, I think I was 21.
21?
Yeah, 22. So,
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. That was,
Did a good
that was
job,
crazy.
too.
That was crazy.
Have you seen it?
Did a good job. I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, that was a while back. So.
When he came to our area, someone told me about it, and I went and looked it up on YouTube, and I watched it, and he did a great job.
Wow. He always does a good job.
Oh, yeah.
No, come on, guys.
Polished.
Come on.
Polished. Just look at that head.
Come on.
See, there's always a backhanded insult coming. Brother
Yeah, I'm
Andy.
waiting on it.
Polish. Look at the head. You know what I
waiting
mean?
on
It's
it.
that good to hear,
I'm waiting
guys.
on it.
Well, at least
I
that's
was
your head
sincere.
this time.
I was sincere. Brother Andy was being Brother Andy. Okay. So, Brother Andy, tell us now
Yes.
your backstory about growing up in a ministry family.
Well, of course, Dad was not right with God when I was born, and then we had a tragedy that took place in the family. My uncle got struck with lightning and killed inside of a cemetery, and it really jarred my dad, shook him. He got right with the Lord. Within a year, sitting under the preaching of Sammy Allen, my mother got saved. And then we were going to a Southern Baptist church, Liberty Baptist Church, there in Dalton, Georgia. And so Dad really felt like God was calling him to preach. He surrendered to preach, and we wound up going to Atlanta. Dad went to Emmanuel Baptist Bible College in Atlanta, and Dad became good friends with Edgar Thomas. And the Lord really began to use Dad. He went to his first church in the Atlanta area, pastored it for 9 months, and as I've always quipped, left because of health reasons. They got sick of him, and so we left, and then wound up. He took the church in Tennessee and stayed there 40 years. So I was in public school system, wasn't in a Christian school setting. So I went to public school as the preacher's kid, as the most conservative preacher's kid in the community. Several preacher's kids in the school, but I was of the flavor of the most conservative.
Right.
So growing up in a pastor's home, for me, it's all I knew, but it was very tough. I mean, just really, really tough. But I'm thankful for it because I really do think it helped to shape some of the personality that I have.
Now, when you say tough, in what respect? What made it tough for you to grow up in a pastor's family?
Being in public school and being completely different in your dress standards, completely different in, there was, at that particular time, they were in PE classes, they were dancing and going mixed bathing, that kind of thing, swimming in the public, swimming pools as a school. And, I wasn't allowed to do that. So it puts you in a position of being different than everybody else. But I have since, we in our Jubilee meeting, we had a friend of mine, Brother Randall Freeman. Brother Randall and I went to school together nearly all our life, and he's gotten saved, and God's put him in the ministry, and he's and Brother Randall's got cancer, and it's pretty bad he's dealing with. But he came to our Jubilee meeting, and he stood up and testified during Jubilee, and he said, back when we were kids, he said, I made fun of you. He said, I made fun of how you were raised. I made fun of, the stands you took. He said, but I wish that had been my life.
How about that?
And looking back on it now, and there's a guy out of Atlanta. He is just a very wealthy guy. Went to school with this guy, and he reached out to me on Facebook, and he said, Andy, he said, I've got one child, and he said, I have pointed my son toward you to show him, you live for God, when you was a kid, and had some Christianity about you that you weren't ashamed of. And he said, I have pointed to my kid and let him know he can live for God too, in a public school setting.
Now, let me ask a question before I flip it to Brother Chris. So that was a little bit of, say, what you would call the side of being a ministry kid that brought some hardship to your life.
Yeah.
Now flip the script, and
Okay.
what about the positivity? What is it that you look back now and think, man, I sure am glad the Lord allowed me to be part of a ministry family? What's the positive side of it?
Well, I think there was a lot of positive in that it was a protection. There was a lot of protection from the secular world in regard to, not to where you couldn't function, okay? Because my dad let me go to work when I was 12 years old, working 7 days a week, from the age of 12. And, there was there was a leniency back then in regard to raising your kids in a community. And we were in a very wicked community, but you as a normal person didn't feel unsafe. And so you were, there was a leeway to allow your kids to work and to make it and to learn some things. And growing up in a pastor's home, that we were financially strapped. Back in those days, when you surrendered to ministry, you literally surrendered to poverty. That was the mindset. You don't go get a secular job. You stay in the ministry even if it starves you to death. You learn how to grow a garden, and you learn how to shoot stuff and eat it. And you do without. That was basically the ministry mindset. And my dad was an extremely hardworking guy, but he had bought into that mindset. And so growing up in poverty, literally, Dad raised us on less than $100 a week. Growing up in poverty allowed me to develop a work ethic inside of me that has really paid in these years of life. I think that's one of the positives, and another of the positives is the fact that because of Dad's testimony in the community and his stand in the community, the local markets and grocery stores and all of that, they didn't sell any alcohol at all until my dad resigned from his church. Walmart didn't sell alcohol until Dad resigned from his church. That's the kind of weight he carried in that town, and that makes a guy proud that you've got a dad that carries that kind of weight, and you're his son.
Wow.
So,
phenomenal testimony.
Absolutely.
How about that? But Chris, so yours was a little bit different. You didn't spend a decade or more in a home of a pastor. Your dad started pastoring, I believe, right before you got married and left home. And so your experience is probably a little bit different. But if you would like to, give some pros and cons about
Sure. Well, just being around ministry, like even with my grandfather and stuff. But I tell you, I'm gonna be honest. For me, most of it was positive, and I think it's a couple reasons. Number one is because even though my dad wasn't the pastor, but my grandfather was, and we were very close. We lived next door to him and very close, and so I knew a lot. And my dad was privy to a lot that was going on in the church and stuff like that. Even though he was on the road with Rock of Ages, but I'm gonna be honest. My parents. Even in the years Dad pastored, they just don't talk about church problems. My grandfather was the same way. They just don't talk. We'd sit around, we'd talk about the church, but it was good things. It was all. And I was just raised around church is great. And when we weren't at church, which we were all the time, we'd sit at home and talk about going to church, and then we'd go to revival meetings, and we'd go to that was just our life, and we loved it. There was always a positive, and I knew there were hard times. Our church split. When I was 16 years old, we had a church split. It was ugly. Just nasty. Just horrible. And it affected me. It impacted me very deeply in ways I don't think I really fully understood till later on. But even then, it was just, I don't know. It was positive. It was good, and there was the emphasizing of the good part of it. And my grandfather's a tender-hearted man, and he just always just had a heart. Just loved people, and he wasn't a fighter, but even though the church split, he wasn't a brawler. He wasn't, he didn't go around, and even my dad, they just didn't go around talking about how bad things were and how rough everybody was. So I think that helped a lot. I don't ever remember growing up with a negative view of ministry. Now, like financially, the church took good care of my grandfather. Now, he pastored churches in the past that were a lot smaller, but now he was always bivocational. He retired from UPS. He drove a tractor trailer UPS, and my dad worked. I remember him working until he went full time with Rock of Ages, raise support. But even then, we had a nice home, and I don't ever remember really doing with. If we did, I didn't realize it, I guess. And then when I started working, I bought my own car and paid my own insurance, did all that stuff, and so I just started making money and doing my own thing. By the time I was, 15, 16 years old, and so I never really felt like I did without anything. It was all positive in my view.
I think there's something. Excuse excuse me, to be said about the fact every church has some problems, issues.
Oh, yeah,
There's
absolutely.
no such thing as one without it. But how the family processes that, and then how they lay that out before their kids, I think makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah,
whether
absolutely.
a kid might grow up with battling bitterness or with a bad view of whatever, I think it's so important until a kid becomes an adult mentally
they just
able
can't
to process
adult situations and stuff.
Exactly. I think it's so smart to keep those things between mom and dad.
And I do, and I've just implemented. And nobody's ever really told me this, I don't guess, or maybe I just kind of just picked up on it. But I've just implemented that in my house. We do not talk about church problems at home.
Yeah.
Now my wife and I, even my wife and I don't dump everything on her. I never have. I mean, we'll have to discuss some things, but I don't put everything on her. I want her to, because she kind of sets the tone for the home. I want to stay happy and healthy. And my kids, they have in fact, we always discuss, like, if we if we go on vacation or if we do something, I've made mention several times to them. I'm like, look, the only reason we have a roof over our head and we have these things, we're able to buy this, we're able to get that. I said, God's people have been good to our family.
That's right.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
And so, absolutely.
Our kids really, and we've had even issues even at Walters Grove, but I've sat them down and said, look, we love these people. We're not mad at them. This is just how, and tried to explain things and just say, look, God's people have been, we don't, and I know there are some preachers that have been through a lot more than I have. I've been spoiled. I know that. But honestly, we don't have any sad stories to tell about the people of God.
Let me piggyback on something he said a moment ago. I used to preach a meeting every year, once or twice a year for a fella in a different state. And one of the things about him was the fact that he and his wife were two of the most negative people I'd ever encountered. And they had a couple of children. And anytime you sat down around the dinner table, it was going to be negative about this person in the church, negative about this family in the church, and negative about this problem in the church, and negative about what's going on here in the church, and why the church doesn't do this or that or the other. And one day when the boys had stepped away, I said, you got to stop this. I said, you and your wife have got to stop this. I said, the view of church and church people and the things of God that these boys have is going to be based on all this negative rhetoric around your dinner table.
Absolutely.
And if you're talking to me about it and I'm not even plugged in here, how are you talking when nobody's here but you?
Yeah.
And I said, this is going to ruin your children.
Absolutely.
Well, it wasn't long after that I didn't get any more invites back. And then both of their children have turned out to really have no use for the church.
Bitterness against the church. Well, I think it's hypocritical for some of us preachers. I know about every preacher I've ever heard. They always tell the people, don't go home and talk about the preacher. Your kids will hate the preacher, and they won't listen to what he has to say. You go home, have the preacher for lunch. But it's the same way. If the preacher and his family, if they go home and talk about the people, well, your kids are going to grow up and hate church. They're going to have a negative view of it. So, I just think, it's just a lot of it's just logic and just practical. It just makes sense, right?
Whether intentional or unintentional, a preacher can actually breed division in his own church through what his kids hear, and then how they go back and talk about, or even the reactions to people and situations. So let me flip this conversation with what time we have left in the podcast. So both of you had different experiences especially because of your time probably in a preacher's or pastor's home. However, now you both are pastors, and you have you've raised your children as pastors' kids. You are raising your children thus far for 15 years as a pastor's kid, getting ready to be in the field of evangelism. And so kind of give us a fatherly pastoral, or let me just a fatherly aspect on how you're trying to raise your kid in an environment that will produce the healthiest soul of their heart for coming out of a pastor's family.
Sure.
Okay, we'll start with Brother Andy. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, as you said, all of mine are raised or reared, whichever is the proper word. But all of my children are serving the Lord. My daughter and her husband are in Terrell, Texas, starting a church at the moment. All of the rest of my children are here with us in the church, not just warming the pew on the back pew as a lot of preachers' kids do, but they're actively involved in music. They're actively involved in teaching Sunday school classes, leading the choir. They're ministry oriented. I don't have any of my children other than my daughter who are in the quote unquote ministry of, preaching. And Sarah's, the pastor's wife out there. But here to me, Brother Michael, here's, I think this is key. If your children are going to turn out right in regard to the ministry and continue to serve the Lord, the preacher's going to deal with a lot of negatives. But I think that you have got to make this just what we did. We made our children a part of the ministry itself.
Yes, sir.
A part of the ministry itself. They served in the ministry. They were known as being a part of what was going on in the ministry, and it became theirs as much as it was ours.
Amen. Absolutely. Brother Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, obviously I'm trying to get to where what Brother Andy has done, and even yourself, Brother Poindexter, preachers I look up to as far as in the sense of, raising your family, good kids that have grown and getting that stage where they're making their own choices and they're making good ones. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Right. Before we go any further, so your oldest just turned.
Yeah, she'll be 16 here 16, November. Yeah,
16 November. Okay, and then it goes all the way down to Stetson's hold.
Yeah, Ben.
I'm sorry.
Well, no.
He's got a new one.
He's named
after
right.
Ben.
Yeah. So I got my Georgia Bulldogs thing on.
Sorry.
Yeah. He's not a very good role model, but he did bring 2 championships to Georgia. I like the name Bennett, so we call it Bennett. So I got a 16-year-old. She's about to be 16. My boy just turned 14 actually this week and yesterday, and then the twins are 11, and then we have a 1-year-old.
Okay, so he's got to go. Now go ahead.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes. So I got a while. But I'm trying to get there, and I think the letting them see the positive side of ministry, like we were talking about, I think that's a big deal. I think that was a big deal in my life. But that thing of being involved in ministry, that is a big deal as well. But I'll tell you something else that made a difference in my life was that my parents, they made sure I was around some other adults that were not them, but that love God, love ministry.
Amen.
And I tell you, that made an impact on my life. Like, this isn't just mom and dad.
Yeah.
This is everybody. And so I'm thinking, and specifically, I can mention a couple things. Like when I was 13, 14 years old, maybe. I don't remember exactly how old I was. But my dad let me travel with Brother Dwayne Moore for a couple weeks. That's before he was married. Brother Dwayne wasn't married then. And so I traveled with him a little bit. I went on a mission trip with Brother 2 weeks in Mexico. I just met a lot of other people. And then there were some preachers that really got in my life, involved in my teenage years, and started investing in me. And I think that made a difference. It wasn't just like, this is what my parents want. This is it's bigger than just our home. And then just seeing some things that were real,
Amen.
So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll be honest with you, it's been a very enriching conversation. I did not grow up in a preacher's home or a pastor's home. So as we've raised our kids, one of the things we've tried to do is focus on the goodness of God in our lives, how good God's people have been to us, the privilege of serving with them. And then another thing too is I've been able to bring a perspective to our children's life of what it was like not to grow up in this.
Yeah, that's right.
And said, look, you'll never understand. You become a seasoned adult, all that you were spared from.
Amen.
And all the blessings that come with that. Well, I don't know about you, but I have been extremely blessed, encouraged, and enriched by the conversation with these 2 men about their experience and then how it has impacted their desire to father their children and lead their families. And I encourage you to share the episode. There may be folks out there in ministry that are young in it, and this would be very enriching. Or some maybe that have lived through some of the things these men have went through, and this may help their perspective along the way. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we hope you keep pressing on the upward way. God bless you.